2 years ago, the richest man in my city asked me out. I said no. He kept trying. I kept refusing. Today, he flew across 3 countries just to bring me coffee. This is the story of how ignoring someone completely changed both our lives forever. Before I dive into this crazy story, hit that like button if you've ever had someone chase you when you weren't interested, and subscribe because trust me, you won't believe how this ends. Now let me tell you everything. Let me paint you a picture of my life 2 years ago. I was 24, working the morning shift at Billionaire, this little coffee shop right in the heart of downtown. Nothing fancy, just your typical place where business people grabbed their caffeine fix before disappearing into those glass towers. I was also juggling night classes at the community college, studying business administration because I had bigger dreams than just making lattes forever. My days were simple. Wake up at 5, work until 3, study until midnight, repeat. I was focused, determined, and honestly, I didn't have time for distractions. Then he walked in on a Tuesday morning in October. I remember it clearly because the autumn light was hitting the windows just right, and this man stepped through our door like he owned the entire building. Perfectly tailored navy suit, shoes that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and a watch that caught the light every time he moved his wrist. Everything about him screamed money and power. He had that confident stride that rich men always have, like the world was designed specifically for their convenience. When he reached my counter, he flashed this practiced smile, the kind I'd seen 100 times before from guys exactly like him. They all thought their wallet was their personality. He ordered a simple black coffee, which surprised me, but then he lingered, started making small talk about the weather, asking about my day, complimenting the shop's atmosphere. I could see where this was heading from a mile away. "So," he said, leaning slightly on the counter, "I'm wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me this weekend. I know this amazing place downtown." His voice was smooth, confident, like rejection wasn't even a possibility in his world. I handed him his coffee and looked him straight in the eye. "Thanks, but no. I'm not interested." Simple, direct, final. I'd learned long ago that rich guys like him saw women as trophies to collect, and I wasn't anyone's prize. Most guys would have taken the hint and moved on, not him. The very next morning, there he was again, same time, same confident smile. "Good morning," he said, like yesterday's rejection never happened. He ordered his black coffee, tried to start another conversation about the weather, and left a generous tip. I stayed professional but kept my distance. This was just business, nothing more. This became our routine. Every single morning for 2 weeks straight, he'd walk in at exactly 8:15. He'd order his coffee, attempt small talk, and I'd respond with the bare minimum required by customer service. "How's your day going?" he'd ask. "Fine, thanks," I'd reply, already reaching for the next customer. But he never seemed discouraged. If anything, my indifference only made him more determined. By week 3, his strategy shifted. He started bringing colleagues with him, probably thinking it would make him seem more normal, less like some rich guy on the prowl. They'd sit at the corner table, and I'd catch him glancing over while pretending to be deep in business discussions. He even learned my schedule somehow, showing up only on days when I was working. When my coworker Maya covered my shifts, he'd mysteriously be absent. Maya found the whole thing hilarious. "Girl, do you know who that is?" she'd whisper during our breaks. "He drives a different luxury car every week, and he's clearly obsessed with you." The other girls thought I was crazy for not being flattered, but I'd seen this exact script play out before with other women. Rich guy gets bored, sees a challenge, pursues until he wins, then moves on to the next conquest. I kept my guard up because I knew better. Money doesn't change a person's character, and his type always thought they could buy their way into anyone's heart. I wasn't interested in being anyone's temporary entertainment. By month 2, he'd upgraded from persistent coffee visits to full-blown grand gestures. I arrived at work one Monday to find an enormous bouquet of white roses waiting at my station. The card simply read, "Hope your week is as beautiful as your smile." See double quote. I found out later his name was Christopher when Maya couldn't stop Googling him. I handed the flowers to a customer who mentioned her anniversary. I wasn't going to be bought with pretty petals. The gifts kept coming. Expensive chocolates I gave to my coworkers. Concert tickets I never used. Even a designer handbag that probably cost more than my car. Each time I'd politely but firmly refuse, telling him I couldn't accept gifts from customers. He'd just smile and say, "Maybe next time." There was always a next time with him. The dinner invitations became more elaborate too. First it was that amazing place downtown. Then it became private chef experiences, weekend getaways, even offers to fly me to Paris for dinner. Each invitation was more outrageous than the last, like he was trying to find my price point. What he didn't understand was that I didn't have one. After 4 months of this, I could see the confusion growing in his eyes. This was probably the first time in his adult life that money hadn't solved his problems. Other customers started noticing too, whispering about the daily deliveries and the man who clearly couldn't take no for an answer. It was becoming embarrassing, and I was getting genuinely frustrated. Then came the morning that changed everything. He walked in with yet another gift, jewelry this time, and I'd finally reached my breaking point. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Listen, I don't know what kind of women you're used to dealing with, but I'm not impressed by your money, your gifts, or your persistence. I'm not interested, and I need you to stop." For 3 days after my outburst, he didn't show up. I thought I'd finally gotten through to him, that maybe he'd moved on to someone else who'd appreciate his wealth and attention. Honestly, I felt relieved. The coffee shop felt normal again, just regular customers ordering their regular drinks without any underlying drama. Then, on Thursday morning, he walked in looking different. No expensive suit this time, just dark jeans and a simple sweater. No flashy watch, no confident swagger. He approached the counter hesitantly, almost like he was nervous. "Just a black coffee, please," he said quietly, then added, "And I want to apologize. You were right. I was being disrespectful, and I'm sorry." I handed him his coffee, expecting him to leave, but he lingered by the counter. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "What made you so sure I was just another rich guy trying to buy your attention?" There was something genuine in his voice that I hadn't heard before, something vulnerable that caught me off guard. Against my better judgment, I found myself answering. "Because that's all guys like you ever do. Flash money, expect results." He nodded slowly, like he was really thinking about what I'd said. "You're probably right about most of us," he admitted. "But what if I told you the money thing is actually the problem, not the solution?" Over the next few weeks, our interactions completely changed. He still came in every morning, but instead of trying to impress me, he'd just talk. Real conversations about books, about current events, about dreams and fears. He told me about growing up wealthy but lonely, about never knowing if people liked him or just his bank account, about how exhausting it was to always wonder about everyone's motives. Slowly, I started seeing past the expensive exterior to someone who seemed genuinely lonely and searching for something real. Those morning conversations became the best part of my day, though I'd never admit it out loud. Christopher, I'd finally started thinking of him by his name, would arrive just as the morning rush died down, giving us these perfect 10-minute windows to actually talk. Not small talk, but real conversations that left me thinking long after he'd gone. He told me about his childhood, how his parents were so busy building their empire that he was raised by nannies and boarding schools, how he'd learned early that his value was tied to his family's wealth, not to who he was as a person. "I've never had a friend who didn't want something from me," he said one morning, stirring his coffee absently. "Even in college, people would get close to me just for the connections, the parties, the access to my family's world." I started sharing things too, telling him about my dreams of opening my own business someday, about the exhaustion of working and studying, but loving the independence it gave me, about growing up with a single mum who taught me that you earn everything you get and that nobody owes you anything just because you exist. He listened to every word like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard. The vulnerability in his voice when he talked about trust issues hit me harder than I expected. "You know what the worst part is?" he said one rainy morning. "I stopped believing that anyone could like me just for me years ago. That's why I kept trying to impress you with expensive things. It's the only language I know." For the first time, I understood that his persistence wasn't about conquest or ego. It was about desperation to find someone who might see him as more than a walking bank account. When he finally asked me out again, it was different. "Would you maybe want to grab coffee somewhere else sometime? Somewhere we could talk without me having to order it from you?" He looked genuinely nervous, like my answer actually mattered to him as a person, not just as a challenge to overcome. I surprised myself by saying yes, not because of his money or his status, but because somewhere between all those morning conversations, I'd started to see Christopher the person instead of just another wealthy man trying to buy my attention. That first real date was nothing like what I expected. Instead of some fancy restaurant, Christopher took me to a small bookstore cafe across town, the kind of place he'd probably never stepped foot in before meeting me. We talked for 4 hours straight, about everything and nothing, and for the first time, I saw him truly relaxed. He wasn't performing or trying to impress anyone, he was just himself. Now, 2 years later, people ask me what changed my mind about him. The truth is, nothing changed about my standards. He just finally met them. He learned that love isn't something you can purchase or negotiate. It's something you earn through authenticity, vulnerability, and genuine connection. All those months of me ignoring his wealth forced him to discover parts of himself he'd buried under expectations and privilege. Christopher tells people he's addicted to my love, and at first I thought it was just romantic talk, but he explained it to me one evening as we walked through the city. "You know what's addictive about the way you love me," he said. "It's the first unconditional thing I've ever experienced. You loved me when I had nothing to offer but conversation. That's not addiction, that's freedom." He was right. Being ignored, being rejected, being forced to try again without his usual advantages taught him how to be real with another person for the first time in his life. And watching him discover that authenticity taught me something equally important about myself, that I'd been so busy protecting myself from gold diggers in reverse that I almost missed something genuine. Our relationship now is built on everything that matters: mutual respect, shared dreams, genuine friendship, and yes, deep love. Christopher still has his wealth, but it's become background noise to who we are together. He's learning to trust that people can love him for himself, and I've learned that sometimes the most unexpected packages contain exactly what you've been looking for. The irony isn't lost on me. The very thing that made me reject him initially, his persistence, was actually proof of how much finding real connection meant to him. Sometimes the best love stories start with the word no and end with understanding why that no was necessary for both people to become who they needed to be. So that's my story. 2 years of saying no led to finding something real. What do you think? Have you ever completely misjudged someone? Drop your stories in the comments below. And if this story taught you something about love and patience, smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories like this. Trust me, I've got more crazy tales to share. See you in the next one.